Today we're going to look at the Valley of Elah. We are studying about 7 valleys, and we have been to Sidom, and we have been to Eshcol, and we have been to Kidron. And in every valley that we have studied and that we are going to study in the future, our purpose in these valleys is to learn to trust God. Because it's easy to trust Him a lot of times on the mountaintop, isn't it? But boy, you get in the valley and you've got difficult circumstances and everything, and it gets hard because the nature in me, I want to do something. I want to take control. I have a plan. No. I have to learn to trust Him in the valley. Now, last week we left David at Mahanaim. And if you were here, you know that means 2 camps. And he had a physical camp. He had all these people. They were in fear and so forth. We know that Absalom was right down there in Gilead, hot on his trail. We know that his son has put together a rebellion to take the throne away from his dad. He even doesn't care if his dad gets killed because he came to him and he said, I want your kingdom and your crown, but I don't want a relationship with you. That was the attitude of his son. And so he's lying there, and it's a very dangerous time. He doesn't know what's going to happen. And he wrote Psalm 3. And so I just want to read it one more time. This is one of my favorite Psalms. I have memorized this because I know where David was. How many times are we in situations and in difficulties where there's a little bit of fear rising up in us? We don't know what's going to happen. We can even think about what's going on in our world and our culture, and we really don't know exactly what's going to happen. But here's what David said when he was at Mahanaim, and Absalom and all of his troops were hot on their trail, wanting to kill him. Psalm 3. He said, Lord, how are they increased that trouble me? Many are they that rise up against me. Many there be which say of my soul, there's no help for him in God. Selah. Think about that. He says, he turns his focus into God and he says, but thou, O Lord, you are a shield for me. You're my glory and the lifter up of mine head. Think about where he is when he writes this. He said, I cried unto the Lord with my voice, and he heard me out of his holy hill. We cry out to him and he hears us. Think about where David was. He said, I cried to the Lord in the midst of all that, and he heard me. He says in verse 5, I laid me down and slept. Now, isn't that a miracle? I laid me down and slept, and then he said, I awaked. I woke up because the Lord had sustained me. And then verse 6, he said, I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people who have set themselves against me round about. He had that many people coming after him. Remember, it said all of Israel had sided with Absalom. And who does David have? A lot of Gentiles. He had a lot of Gentiles. And he goes on to say, he said, arise, O Lord, my God, and save me, for you have smitten all my enemies upon the cheekbone, and you have broken the teeth of the ungodly. He's older now. Has he seen God do all these things against the enemy? And then he ends the psalm with, salvation belongs unto the Lord, and thy blessing is upon your people. I think that is one of the most awesome psalms, because I know where he was, learned the context of some of the things that he writes. Where was he? What was going on in his life? And he's able to write that. So we're going to move from the Kidron Valley, and today we're going to go to the Valley of Elah. In the Kidron Valley, David was pretty old. He was nearing the end of his life. We're going back to Elah when he's a shepherd boy, taking care of his daddy's sheep. I hope you will enjoy this lesson. I learned so much in this lesson that I didn't know. So we're going to set a lot of background today because I don't need to tell you the story of David and Goliath. We need to understand what's under that and what God is trying to teach us. So I'm going to have you looking at maps a lot because we need to understand where we are. So here is a map of the nation of Israel. Do you see the little dot at the top with has water in it? There's the Dead Sea. If you go almost straight down, you see a dot with water in it. I'm sorry, the top one is the Sea of Galilee. You should have stopped me. The top one is the Sea of Galilee. The bottom one is the Dead Sea. And we also have, see the little blue line, squiggly? That's the Jordan River. So there's a lot of water over here. Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, and then down into the Dead Sea. So that's on the east side of this nation of Israel. Now, do you see the yellow dot? The water just changed to a yellow dot at the bottom. Are y'all there with me? Good, okay. This is the Valley of Sidom. This is where our first valley was, the Valley of Sidom. What happened there? Lot. It was the valley of wickedness and sin. Lot was there with all of those people in Sodom and Gomorrah, and you had 5 kings. And what happened? Remember, it had tar pits. This was a picture of you and I being caught in the quagmire of sin. And when the evil kings from over on the other side in Mesopotamia and Babylon came over, they captured them. Remember? And they were going to take them. They went several hundred miles, and they were going back over and take them around Babylon. Abraham heard about it. He's a type of Jesus. And what did he do? He got his 318 trained servants, and he got some other people, and they went up, almost 200 miles. They chased the bad guys. And he restored Lot, all the people, and he got everything back. That's a picture of our redemption. Right. Okay, so that's where that happened. Then we move to the purple. Do you see the purple circle? So we're at Hebron now. This is the Valley of Eshcol. And at the Valley of Eshcol, remember, that's where he told them, he gave them proof. This is the land flowing with milk and honey. I will give you everything you need. And they had those grapes that they had to carry, remember, on 2 poles. And they had pomegranates and figs. And he said, I will give you everything you need. I will provide for you. Here's the proof at the Valley of Eshcol. And they took it back to the people. And they said, here, it's everything God said. But there's giants in the land. And what did they say? We're not going. We will not go, even though you promised you would fight the battles and you would be our victor. But we're not going. I've given you proof. We're not going. That's what happened at the Valley of Eshcol. Then, if you see the green circle that just came up, okay, that was the Kidron Valley at Jerusalem. So you can see the location of the 3 valleys that we've already talked about. Now we are going to move over to the red one. Do you see it's out further west? This is the Valley of Elah. And I just noticed it when I was doing this slide. All of the valleys so far have been in the southern kingdom. I don't know if that means anything, but it was interesting. So this is where we're going to move. We're going to go way over out west now. Out west, that way, right? We're going to go out west on the nation of Israel, and we're going to the Valley of Elah. So here is a kind of a modern view of it, kind of a helicopter view, and you see the red star down there. This is the valley. It is named after a terebinth tree. It is a triangle shaped, it's long, and it's shallow. It's flat. It's located in the west bank, and it's on the western edge of the Judah low hills. So we're going to have many more maps and pictures so you have a good idea of what this valley looks like. Now, if you look at the top of the screen, do you see the circle with the water in it? Okay. Sea of Galilee. Sorry, I don't know why I've got a mental block. Okay, and then you follow the water on down, and the other one is the Dead Sea. Okay, now the green dot is Bethlehem, which is just right by Jerusalem. Okay, and the red dot is signifying the Valley of Elah. So are y'all getting oriented where we are? Okay, now, I want you to go with me, and we have been on a ship out in the Mediterranean. We're getting off of the ship, so we are over there by the Mediterranean Sea. All right, y'all with me? We're standing on the beach. And we are now wanting to travel over to Jerusalem, Hebron, and Bethlehem, which are the 3 blue dots. Okay? This is the heart of Israel. These are your 3 big cities, the heart of the nation. Keep thinking about you and me. Now, if I'm standing on the beach, I've got to have a pathway to get to the heart of the nation, true? Okay, and think about we're back in this time with David and them. All right, so we're way back. Now, you see my little gold bar? The gold bar shows, oh, this is one of the travel routes. They had travel routes to get you to Jerusalem. And so I follow the gold bar, and we're walking along, and suddenly we come to the little orange oval. That's the Valley of Elah. It is going to connect me. It's on a coastal route, a travel route to get me to Jerusalem, Hebron, and Bethlehem, which is the heart of the nation. Are y'all with me? Okay, so we follow the gold bar, and then we're going to go through the little orange oval, and we're passing through the Valley of Elah. It's long, it's flat, and it's shallow. This is where the battle is going to occur. Now, here's another map. We're still trying to get oriented here. Do you see the green bar going across, east to west? The green bar starts at the city of Gath. Whose hometown? Goliath's hometown. And it is going to end at Bethlehem. Whose hometown? David. Oh, this is really getting interesting. Okay, so the Elah Valley connects the Philistine city of Gath, which is Goliath's hometown, and we're going to see Goliath is a type of Satan. And then it will go all through the valley, and I wind up at the Judahite city of Bethlehem, which is David's hometown, and he's a type of Jesus Christ. Here's the valley that connects the two, and we're going to be fighting for who controls it, because this valley leads to the heart of the nation. Now, I see some of you just had an aha moment with me. This is really so cool. Now, if I start out on the Mediterranean coast over there and travel to the Valley of Elah, I go about 20 miles. And then from Gath to Elah is about 8 miles, and the Elah Valley over to Bethlehem is about 12 miles. Know that the whole east-west of Israel right there, we've only got it less than 60 miles, so it's not a real wide country. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the battle of David and Goliath. This is really a battle for one who's a type of Satan and a type of Jesus Christ, going to take place in this valley. We're going to do a little historical background first. Who lived in the promised land that God gave to Abram and the children of Israel? All those Canaanites. They were there, remember, when God told Abram, I want you to go to a land that I'm going to show you? And it says in the Bible, he got there, and who was in the land? The Canaanites were already there, right? They probably don't want to leave. They've been living there. And remember, God had Abraham and the group go down to Egypt? And for 400 years, he let the Canaanites live in the land. He rained favor on them. Why? He wanted them to see who the true God was. But what happened? They got worse and worse and more wicked and more evil and more polytheistic. Now God says, y'all are going to go in and drive them out. Okay, so that's where we are. Now they were a Canaanite people. The Philistines is who we're going to be talking about today. They're a Canaanite people who inhabited Israel before Israel ever got to go in the promised land. And they're wicked, wicked, wicked. Now, although there had been battles between them on a regular basis, Israel had never been able to conquer and fully drive out the Philistines, who worship many false gods, including the worship of Baal. Now remember, I'm at a time when David's still a young shepherd boy. He's not been king yet. So that's what we're talking about. Now, the powerful Philistines were the high-tech people of the day. They possessed the latest weapons of iron. They had chariots of iron. They did all they could to prohibit Israel from having any access to iron and their technology. They're the ones that had those chariots of iron. Here's a picture if you were to go visit and you see the ironworks there. They were known for their technology and their advancement in ironworks. They were a powerful, cultured people who possessed the high tech of the day, and they didn't want Israel to even have a smidgen of it. Right. So in chapter 13, verse 5, this gets real interesting. The Philistines have gathered themselves together, and they're going to go fight Israel. Now look who they're bringing with them. They have 30,000 chariots with horses. 30,000. That's almost a chariot for almost everybody in Bartlesville. All right? They have 6,000 men on a horse, and they have foot soldiers like the sand of the seashore. This is their army. Highly technical. They have chariots and so forth. They come up and they pitched in Michmash eastward from Bethaven. Now, here you and I are. We're on Israel's side, right? When the men of Israel saw that they were in trouble, for the people were hard pressed. Look at what the children of Israel are doing. They kept themselves hidden in caves. They're in crevices and cliffs. They're going in the crypts and the tombs, and they're out in the pits. They're hiding. They're trying to get away from 30,000 chariots and all of these horsemen and foot soldiers. Listen to verse 7. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan River so they could go to the land of Gad and Gilead. But Saul, he remained at Gilgal, and all the troops with him, and they are quaking with fear. And people are deserting. We can kind of understand, can't we? But they're deserting. Okay. This is the most interesting verse, and it sent me on a rabbit trail. And y'all are going to go with me. This is the reason no blacksmith could be found in all of the land of Israel, because the Philistines said, otherwise those Hebrews, they'll learn to make spears and swords. And I thought, I have never noticed this in all of my reading. So all Israel went down to the Philistines. If I had an axe or something that needed sharpened, and I'm an Israelite, I've got to take it over to the Philistia people, and they will sharpen all of my instruments that I need, because aren't we an agricultural people? They're plows and so forth. And I've got to pay 2/3 of a shekel for my plowshare, mattocks, forks, axes, and to fix the cattle goads. Do they kind of have something hanging over us? And we need them, don't we? What's the result? Now it's the day of battle. There's no sword, no spear in the hands of any of the people that were with Saul and Jonathan. So here you and I are, and we have no sword and no spear, and we're coming against this enemy out there that is greatly outnumbers us, and they have chariots, and they have all these horsemen and so forth. We can assume, I'm assuming, that the Israelite blacksmiths had either been killed or captured or forced to stop practicing their trade, and on the day of battle we only have 2 swords in our whole army. And it's Saul and his son Jonathan. Now, what do I have? Oh, I might have a shepherd's staff, I might have a club, maybe I've got a bow and an arrow. That's all the ammunition I've got. No wonder they were terrified, because by human standards, they don't stand a chance against that, right? By human standards, did y'all get that? Okay, good. So then I thought of the poem that Longfellow wrote, The Village Blacksmith. And he says, under the spreading chestnut tree, a village smithy stands. The smith, he is a mighty man with large and sinewy hands, and the muscles of his brawny arms are strong as iron bands. Think of shows like Little House on the Prairie. And what's the other one I thought of? Gunsmoke. All those, they always had a blacksmith who was very important for the function of the town. So the blacksmith profession was a centerpiece of life in every American town. I'm recalling the scripture. Why were they running and hiding and losing? Because there was no blacksmith in Israel. That's what it said. Transportation depended upon the blacksmith's custom-made horseshoes. The farmers depended upon his carefully designed plows. Lumberjacks depended upon his axes and saws. And builders depended upon a variety of his hand tools. Was it extremely important to have a blacksmith in your town, in your community? Now, the blacksmith worked behind the scenes. He's pounding away on his anvil, sweating from the heat of the forge and the strain of his labor. But his diligent, careful work behind the scenes, he provided services that will enable others to do their work more efficiently. The same was true in ancient Israel. The blacksmith's role was even more important because he provided not only essential tools, but also weapons of war, to have a sword and a spear. And when I'm going to battle against the Philistines, who has a sword and a spear in my army? 2 people. Where's my blacksmith? It says there were none. There were no blacksmiths in Israel. They're the unheralded servants who work behind the scenes in hot, sweaty, dirty, tiring jobs. Yet without their services, the army of God, the body of Christ, will be poorly equipped for battle. So let's think about some of them that we need in the Lord's army. Those who serve on the front lines of the church's army constantly depend upon the supportive ministry of those who are serving behind the scenes. I have a group that does a lot to make this Bible study function. I have a lot of, quote, blacksmiths. In every congregation, there are countless difficult and sometimes thankless jobs which have to be done. These jobs aren't as noticeable as maybe somebody preaching or singing a solo, playing in the praise band, or teaching a Sunday school class. But if those jobs behind the scenes aren't done, the impact on the body of Christ is tremendous. It is tremendous. Cleaning the church, mowing the yard, picking up trash, weeding the flower beds, painting the walls, waxing the floors, setting up tables and chairs and taking them back down, preparing the communion trays, decorating areas for special occasions, keeping our classroom stocked with supplies, staffing our nursery, etc., visiting the elderly or the sick, taking food to families in need or during times of grief, providing people transportation to the doctor, performing household jobs like plumbing or carpentry, electrical or yard work for free, helping those who have suffered from a fire or flood. It takes a community of blacksmiths for the body of Christ to be efficient and to work well. In Israel, the reason they were afraid and they were deserting, they were going out and hiding, because there was no blacksmith to be found in Israel. I thought that was so interesting, and I've never seen that. The list goes on of the blacksmiths that we need in the body of Christ for us to function. Now, Romans 15:4. Why are we studying this in the Old Testament? Whatever was written in earlier times, is that the Old Testament? It was written for my instruction. As I read all that and I study it and I dig into it, through perseverance and the encouragement of all of that, what do I get? Hope. I get hope from studying all that. And Jesus on the road to Emmaus in Luke 24:27, he said, beginning with Moses and with all the prophets, he explained to them the things concerning who? Himself. In how much of the scripture? All of it. Do we need the whole counsel of God? Yes. So the Old Testament is a book of history which will reveal to me, and this is going to be important in today's lesson, the great seed plots, we're going to talk about it, of God's plan of redemption for the human race. Now, the Old Testament has one villain, who? Satan. It has one hero, who? Jesus. One message, Jesus saves. I go to the New Testament, it has one villain, Satan, one hero, Jesus, one message, Jesus saves. It's the same in the Old and the New. So if we're studying today in the book of 1 Samuel, 1 Samuel, God is transitioning his people. Who's been ruling them before King Saul? Judges, chieftains. And now he is going to allow them to be ruled by kings, correct? But he's raising up. Now, y'all are going to have a senior moment here and forget something. You don't know who his monarch is. All right? We don't know. Okay. So he's raising up, we'll see in 1 Samuel, he's raising somebody up that he is going to make an eternal covenant with. Now, you and I know who it is, but if we pretend we don't, then we'll see how he does this in 1 Samuel. Now, that covenant line that he's going to make, it spills over outside of 2 Samuel. It doesn't just stop there. Does that covenant he makes to bring the Messiah and to have a dynasty that will go on forever, do we see it all then through the rest of the Bible? Yes. So we've got to look at everything as we look for the monarch that he is raising up. The word Goliath comes from the meaning gala. Remember, today we're laying groundwork. These are things I want us to all understand before we go into the particulars of the story, which you already know. Goliath comes from gala, and it means he is the one that will uncover or remove or lead you away into exile. The first use of this word is the first use of a term in the Bible important. First use is crucial because then you take that and you follow that all through the Bible, and it almost always means the same thing from then on. The first use is Genesis 9:6 with Noah. And it says, he drank of the wine and was drunk and became uncovered in his tent. Was he exposed? Yes, and that's that word gala. That's what Goliath means. He's going to uncover something, expose something. Now, this same term is used in Leviticus and Deuteronomy when speaking of uncovering the nakedness of another person. So that's what Goliath is going to be doing to the nation of Israel. Goliath is the uncoverer. He's going to expose something in them and bring it to light. Now, the secondary meaning of exile is tied in with this one because when one is exiled, think of John exiled on the Isle of Patmos. Was he left open and exposed in that state? Yes. Now, the primary meaning of exposer carries the weight of the meaning of his name. Goliath is going to expose the weakness of Israel. Goliath, in a sense, when a big thing comes in my life, he can expose a weakness in me. Y'all see that? He's going to uncover my weaknesses. So, this is really a battle between good and evil. Remember, our valley connects the hometown of Goliath, who represents Satan, with the hometown of David, who represents Jesus Christ. We've got who's going to control this. That's the battle. That's what is really at stake here. This battle is unto death. Either you destroy the evil represented, or it will destroy you. True? All right. Goliath is an abomination. Is he out there day after day profaning the name of God, blaspheming the name of God? And then David is a type of Jesus Christ who's going to step forward and defend God's honor. Goliath has a zeal to get out there and blaspheme the name of God 80 times in 40 days, right? Morning and night. And he's blaspheming. And David's zeal is going to be to defend the God of Israel. So let's go back to David. He's the little shepherd boy. He is a shepherd boy. Was he despised by his brethren? Yes. And so as we talk about David, in your mind, you should now be thinking about how he shows Jesus Christ. Was Jesus Christ despised by his brethren? Yes. So, David is trying to come save Israel at a time of dire physical suffering. Yes, because they are being persecuted, and the Philistines are after them to take some of the land that is actually belongs to Israel. Is there a time of spiritual apostasy? Under Saul? Absolutely. We've got spiritual apostasy going on. We've got suffering of the people going on. Same thing when Jesus came. Was there an apostasy of the nation of Israel? Yes. Was there physical suffering? Yes. They were under Rome. They were being persecuted. So we want to study the confrontation between David and Goliath. It's really prophetic. It's going to give us a picture of the struggle between Jesus Christ and Satan when we get into the New Testament and go to the crucifixion. So, you need to look at the map again. We have some more stuff to talk about on the map. If you go clear to the, I have to look, left side, you see the big blue dot? Okay, the big blue dot over there is on the coast. All right, this all belongs to the Philistines. All of that, where the blue is. Now, there's a little red line, and then the color changes to green. This is going to be a buffer zone called the Shephelah. Now, if you go back to the first lesson we did on valleys, there are 5 Hebrew words for valley. One of them was Shephelah, and that's this area right here in the green. Imagine that we've been at the coast. Low, right? Are y'all with me? Okay. This is low here. It's very flat, like down at the beach. Now, as we come we're going towards the heartland to Jerusalem, are we going to start having the foothills of the mountainous country? Okay, the Shephelah is the foothills. So we're coming out of the flat, we're coming up a little bit, and then the orange there represents the Judean plateau where Jerusalem is. There's more mountains and hills in this area. And then if you go on over towards the Dead Sea, then we have the brown circle, and that's the wilderness of Judea. So we have wilderness, hills and mountains. Now we're descending towards the coast, and in the foothills where we're descending, it's called the what? Shephelah, and then we go to the coast. So y'all see the geographic formations there. We're going to be in the Shephelah, in the green area. Now, here's another map. If you look at the brown kind of in the center, all right, this is where Israelites were dominating the hill country of Judea. They have Jerusalem, Beersheba, and all of that. That's that area. Now, if I go over to the dark green, the Philistines control it because I'm down on the coast now, and I'm flat. Are y'all getting all this? Okay, because it's important when we get to the battle. Now, you see that kind of awkward color, kind of olive, between the brown and the dark green? There's your Shephelah running north to south. And you see that the foothills increase towards the southern part of the map. Okay. Now, the valleys of the Shephelah separate the hills and the coast, right? So I've got hills and coast, but I've got foothills in between where I'm gradually climbing. That's your Shephelah. There are 5 valleys. If I come in from the Mediterranean Sea, I'm going to have 5 choices. 5 valleys that will now cut through the Shephelah and take me over towards the hill country. They have to be guarded vigilantly. Can you imagine if the enemy controlled every valley? We would not have much luck using the Mediterranean Sea and then coming in. Judah's control of the Shephelah, if they controlled all of that area, that meant they were in a strong position, right? Because they've got control. Do we know that in the Bible, sometimes they had control and sometimes the Philistines had control? Yeah, and so the control went back and forth. So the Philistines who occupied the lowlands, now here's your spiritual application. The Philistines are down here, and they have all this coastland. And what are they wanting to do in this battle? They want to keep pushing further inland. I want more of your land. I want more of you. So they have all this stuff on the coast. You might recognize some of the 5 cities there. Gaza, down in the lower left corner. Come up and you see Ashkelon and Ashdod, Ekron, and Gath. And if you read the Old Testament much, you should be familiar with those 5 cities. But what are they doing now in this battle? We've got all this. We want these valleys because we're coming after the heartland. We want to rule your heart. Do y'all see that? Good. Now, do you see the black circle that just popped up? That's Gath. And then, let's see, we have Bethlehem that just popped up in a blue one, and our orange valley in between. That's the focus of this lesson. Are y'all following all this? I hope so, because I don't want to do it again. Okay, so this valley now in the green bar, but it's so important to understand all this, to understand what this battle's all about. The valley offers a backdoor entrance for me to get to the hill country, to Bethlehem. They have got to be stopped in the Valley of Elah. It is the main valley for the trade route to get to the heart of the country. Okay, it's very important. How ironic that the 2 men who are going to face each other now in the valley, in the middle ground, they come from the 2 towns at the either end of the valley. Yeah, isn't this fun? See, I love this stuff. It's just east of Gath, and it ends near Bethlehem. I know it's weird things that make fun for me. Okay, so here we are. The Valley of Elah, this is our battle line. This is the battleground where we're coming. And King Saul and his army, they're out there. They're endeavoring to hold the line. But they don't have much. And so this is the area they're trying to hold it. Now, we're going to describe the battlefield. The Philistines are eager to not only regain the military dominance they once held over Israel, but also their sense of pride. So we've got both armies, and we're going to square off, and we're 15 miles southwest of Jerusalem. So we're not that far away. They are digging in, and they're going to set up camp on the sides of the 2 mountains on opposite sides of the valley. Here's another map. The Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and they gather at Socoh, S-O-C-O-H. Do you see it in the lower right corner? A blue circle, and then a red line goes clear up to Azekah, which is one of their other cities, and they're spread out all through here, but they're going to set up camp. Oh, and by the way, Socoh belongs to Israel, but they're out there in our spot. Okay, and they're going to camp at Ephes Dammon, which is the large blue circle. Y'all see it? And it means border of blood. So that's where they're camped, our enemy. Now, see the yellow one? That's the Israelite army. So one's going to be over here, one over here, the flat valley in between. Now, here's a helicopter view, and I'm going to pull up a lot of colors if y'all will watch. The Tel Soka, it's in the yellow box. My enemy is out there, but it belongs to me. But they want it. Okay, the Valley of Elah is in the orange box. That's where the battle's going to take place. Tel Azekah in the green that just came up. They are spread all from the yellow one all the way around to the green one. We have a huge army. They do. Now, the Philistine camp is in the blue box. The Israelite camp is in the orange box, kind of gold box. Now, here's the battle location in the orange box. Everybody looking? Okay. Now, here's the real important one. This little box right here with the water, that's the dry stream where David's going to pick up 5 stones. Okay. I finally got Oz out of you after all these maps. Okay, so the Philistines are on one mountain over here, and Israel is on the other mountain. The valley is in between them. And we are fighting for control because whoever controls it can get to the heart of the nation. Okay, So the Elah Valley connects Gath. We've been through that. It is a wide open valley. You see that. There aren't many like that. And look, it kind of looks like we're at a football game because we have stadium seating on each side. They're on one side, we're on one, and the football field's down here. Now, each side slopes down to a valley, and there is a brook running between them. Do you see it? It says Elah stream down in the lower left corner. So they've been there for days. We're up in our seats, and they're up in theirs. But no battle is taking place. What are we waiting for? Well, it says neither side really wants to seem to fight because they have steel and bronze in their implements of war. They've got chariots. Where are we stationed? On a mountain and on a mountainside. Guess what? Their stuff is designed for relatively level ground. That's why they always wanted to be in the flat valley, not a mountain slope. They don't have all-terrain vehicles. It's not easily for a heavily protected. We've got almost a 10-foot guy coming out in 125 pounds of armor. He's not going to be very quick on the mountain slope, is he? So we're at a kind of a standstill. Just Goliath coming out every day spewing about blaspheming God. Listen to verse 4. We're finally to verse 4. Then a champion comes forward. So we set the scene, and now a champion is going to come forward from the army encampment of the Philistines. He's named Goliath, and he's from Gath, and Gath means winepress. And Goliath is there to uncover or to expose weakness. This is great. So he is 6 cubits in a span. He's about 10 feet. He has a bronze helmet on his head. He has on scale armor, also called a coat of mail. It weighs about 125 pounds. He has bronze greaves on his legs. He's got a bronze saber slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear is like a weaver's beam, and the head of his spear weighs about 15 pounds. Oh, and he has a shield bearer walking in front of him. He has a soldier with a shield right in front of him. Okay, so here's a picture of him. Fairly good, but I really think he had more armor than this. I don't believe his legs, his legs and arms were exposed. I think most everything was covered except right there, just so he could see. That's what a lot of commentators think. But anyway, you kind of get the idea. So who is a champion? The Bible tells you specifically it's a champion that comes forth. He is the man that will come out between the two camps. So he's one who did not fight in the ranks like an ordinary soldier, but he is going to enter the space between the two hostile camps. And he's going to come out there and challenge the mightiest man of the enemies to come out and fight him. See, so are these people in the stands really getting involved? No. They're just out there watching. So here we have a picture of the Philistine camp and the Israelite camp. They are sending their champion, not an ordinary soldier. He's going to come down and stand in the valley, and he wants them to send their man to come stand in the valley with him. So it's really a battle one-on-one. So this battle, Goliath says, is going to be decided by a single contest, and he expects, I'm representing the enemy, and look at me, and now where's your champion? So he expects them to send out their great warrior. That's what he's expecting. Now, we have just described Goliath, and you've got a good picture of him, right? What he might have looked like. Now, if you jump to verse 12 in this chapter, now they're going to tell you about David. It's nothing mentioned. What about David's stature? What about his strength? What about his weapons? It tells me nothing. What does it tell me about? We're going to talk about his family, his genealogy. And so I'm asking, he's the youngest of 8 sons of Jesse, the Epaphratite of Bethlehem in Judah. I need you to explain that to me, because I don't understand why the Bible is all of a sudden telling me about his genealogy. What's that got to do with it? for him to be the champion? Well, in David's family, the one who will be the champion for Israel, the one that will come out, he's got to be a type of Jesus Christ. Because that's the only one that can battle Goliath and win and have victory. So in order for David to be recognized as the one, his offspring is someday going to be the Messiah. True? We know that. He's got to be of the tribe of Judah. Genesis 48. He's got to be a Bethlehemite. And that's from Micah 5:2. That's why when they tell you about David, they tell you his genealogy. He's got the correct genealogy to be the one to fight Goliath. So, the champion, he is the substitute, and he's going to come battle on behalf of the people. Who do we want to be our champion? Jesus Christ. To fight my battles while I'm hands off. Right? Okay. He will do something that the people cannot do. So David, as a type of Christ, stands between his people and their enemies, and he will be the one that can strike the decisive blow. You and I know that's going to happen. So David's victory here, is it a foreshadowing? David's greater son is Jesus Christ, right? And he will be the true substitute, the champion that will come stand in my behalf and yours and secure a great victory. Right? Yes. 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 He's securing the greatest victory there is. My redemption and victory over death. It says a champion named Goliath came from Gath. And he's 9 feet tall. He's got a bronze helmet. And we want to talk about, it points out to us, he had a coat of scale armor. Now, what does that mean? It was a corselet made of metal scales, but it was sewn on a cloth, so it would overlap one another, but it was flexible, so it would protect his back and his sides. Now, we are dealing with the Philistines, and this is very interesting. So we are going to go to one of their gods. Remember? Dagon. He's in the Bible. Dagon was a merman, not a mermaid. He was a merman, and he was one of their gods that was half fish, half man. Is his lower body all scales? Yes. Okay. Now, I'm going back to Genesis 3:15, and if you don't know this word, here's a new word for you. Brother James says we always need to improve our vocabulary with, theological terms. This is the proto-evangelium. This is the first mention of the gospel in the Bible. Proto-evangelium first. In Genesis 3:15, God's talking. I'm going to put enmity between you and the woman. To whom is he talking? Satan, the serpent, right? I'm going to put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. Her seed is going to bruise or crush your head, and then he will be able to bruise your heel. All right, that's the first proclamation. We want to look at these two seeds because we're looking at a seed plot. Now, the seed of the serpent, those who persecute the seed of the woman. Now, the seed of the serpent, I believe, is eventually going to be the Antichrist because he's the one that will persecute God's people in the tribulation period. But do we have shadows or little pictures or types of that before we ever get there? Yes. Okay, he's depicted in numerous ways throughout the Bible. This is clearly a connection to God's gospel promise of he will crush your head. Yeah, that's what we want to look at. So we're going to 1 Samuel chapter 5. The Philistines captured the ark of God, and boy, they are excited until what happens? They took it from Ebenezer and they took it to Ashdod. That's one of their cities over on the Mediterranean coast in the coastlands. They carried the ark and they put it in Dagon's temple. He's half fish, half man, and he has scales. And the people go to bed. They get up the next day, and poor Dagon is fallen on his face on the ground. Pay attention to how he falls. Face to the ground. before the ark of the Lord. Well, they stand him back up. They go back to bed that night, and they come back the next morning, and now his head and his hands have been broken off. Wow. It says he's fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord, and it cut off his head. Okay. Now, we go back to Genesis 3:15. He will strike your head. Dagon and the Philistines were perennial enemies and persecutors of Israel, and I believe they're being portrayed as like a seed of the serpent because they are trying to fight God's people, they're blaspheming God, and they are persecuting God's people. By mercilessly waging war against the people of God, Goliath and the Philistines, they've aligned themselves against the Creator God and all of his purposes and even for his people. Now, do you see a link? I have a link here. Do you now see a link between Goliath and the seed of the serpent? Okay, and he says, I'm going to put enmity between you and the woman and between your seed and her seed, and he is going to crush your head. Now, Goliath becomes a part, I believe, of the serpent's warfare. Is he coming against God's purposes and he's coming against God's people? He's dressed in scales, just like a serpent. All right, he has trespassed into my land, right? Because this is land that God had given Israel, and he's here wanting to do battle to take it back. And he's defying my God and Israel's people. But he faces a seed of the woman. See, the seed of the woman is going to be Jesus Christ. But are there shadows and types of him before we get to Jesus Christ? Yes, and one of them is David. And notice this, who had earlier been anointed as a future king. Now, I've just got to throw this in. I don't think I put it in the notes because it just dawned on me. David was anointed to be king. He said, God has chosen you. You are to be a king. And he's about, 15, 16, something like that. Did it happen immediately? Did he have to suffer? Was he persecuted? Did a lot of things happen to him, even though God says, I've chosen you to be a king? But it's not going to happen until you have suffered, till you've had trials and tribulations. You're hiding from Saul. Then you will become the king that I destined you to be. Does he tell the church, the body of Christ, that he's destined us to be kings and priests in his kingdom? There's trials and tribulations. Spurgeon says, one of the best quotes, there will be no crown wearers in heaven who are not a cross bearer here on earth. Now, maybe God has said, I want you to be a king. But us going through our trials and tribulations and the way we respond, I believe will determine if that really happens. David went through over 10 years before he became the king that God said he was going to be, and they were not good years. They were hard years. He was hiding much of the time. So, as a result of a stone slung to his forehead, the giant, how did he fall? He's going to fall on his face to the ground. And David cut off his head. So do you see all of that? That actually is what is happening here. So this is an echo of the fate of Dagon and the seed of the serpent. He will strike your head. And Goliath, I believe, is a picture of a seed of the serpent, the Antichrist that will eventually come. So this is very interesting. 1st and 2nd Samuel are filled with head wounds. You think about all the people that came along trying to persecute Israel and doing war with them and so forth, and they wanted their land. Almost everyone in there escaped beheading, but their hair or their beard was caught on the way to their demise. Almost all of them. Also an interesting fact, Saul of Tarsus, he started out persecuting Christians, right? Even though he thought he was doing God's work, he was persecuting them, murdering them, but then he has a miraculous conversion on the road to Damascus, and he was radically transformed. And what happened when he went to the house? Immediately there fell from his eyes something like, so when the scales were removed, then he arose and was baptized, and he received his sight at once. Think about Paul when he went on a missionary journey, and he shipwrecked on the island of Malta, I believe it was, and the serpents were biting. Did the serpents bite affect him? No. No, not at all. So the battle terms are being defined. It says, why are you coming out to draw up in battle formation? This is Goliath. Am I not the Philistine, and you're just the servants of Saul? You need to choose a man. Choose a man. Choose a man for you that will come down to me, and if he can fight me and kill me, we will become your servants. However, if I prevail against him and kill him, then you're going to be our servants and serve us. And the Philistine went on and said, I have defied the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man so that we can fight together. Boy, he's pretty bold. He's irrepressible in his arrogance and his sheer defiance of the people of God. Goliath proposed this ancient tradition of a single combat, little game of one-on-one, and the winner will take all. With all of his strength, with all of his protection, his offensive weapons and secondary assistance, Goliath is the exposer. He's going to expose what's really in the heart of the people. And he's ready to challenge the enemy to battle. What will he uncover concerning the state of Israel? What would he uncover in me? What would he uncover in you when the enemy is attacking? When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Greatly afraid. Without the Spirit of the Lord, had the Spirit of the Lord departed Saul? Had he had it before? But in the Old Testament, the Spirit of the Lord could come and go, right? And Saul now does not have the Spirit of the Lord. He has nothing with which to face the giant but his own human resources. And those are not going to be beneficial. It's interesting to note, here's the people of God. Samuel is out there, the prophet. Saul is the king, and this is David as a shepherd boy, and the whole nation's being led by a man who through disobedience doesn't even have the Spirit of God anymore, and it's God's people. But my leader doesn't even have the Spirit of God in him anymore. He's not being led by the Spirit. Saul had lost contact with the source of all spiritual authority. Consequently, were the people becoming just like it? Just like the leader, because they don't have a leader that is following the Lord. And now they only fear a very powerful enemy because they look at the enemy and that's all they see. I have no spiritual thing to fall back on. The people aren't just discouraged, they are greatly afraid, the Bible says. Now, you can look in the upper right corner, and I think I wrote it on your paper, what we call the Hebrew for this. And it's used 5 times before we get to this section since it was first mentioned. And it means I am shattered, I am dismayed, I am beaten down, and I am scared to death. That's what it means. Now, in Deuteronomy 1:21 is the first time that word was used, and it's always a command. Look, the Lord your God, he has set this land before you. Just go up and possess it. As the Lord God of your father spoke to you, command. Do not fear and don't be discouraged. Second use of this word in Deuteronomy 3:18. The Lord, he's the one, he will go before you. He's going to be with you. He won't leave you. He won't forsake you. So do not fear and don't be dismayed. This is Moses talking to Joshua. Then we go to Joshua 1:1 and 2. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord came and he's talking to Joshua, the son of Nun, and he's Moses' minister. And here's what God tells Joshua. Moses, my servant, is dead. I want you to arise now, go over the Jordan, thou and all this people, unto that land which I do give to them. That's pretty clear. even to the children of Israel. And in verse 9, he says, have I not commanded you? Be strong, be of good courage, don't be afraid, do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. That's God's words to Joshua to encourage him. And then in 8:1, God's talking to Joshua again. He says, do not be afraid, don't be dismayed. Take all the people of war with you and arise, go up to Ai, because had they been defeated? Yes. And see, I have given it now into your hand, the king of Ai, his people, his city, and the land. And then in 10:25, Joshua's talking to the people. Same words. Don't be afraid. Don't be dismayed. Be strong and of good courage, for the Lord will do to all your enemies. He's going to fight them, and he will drive them all out. Joshua is encouraging them after the defeat of the 5 kings. All 5 times this word is used before we get to this scene. The Lord is the one who showed up. He provided the victory if God's people will only trust him and follow his lead. But what's my problem? I don't have a leader who has the Spirit of the Lord right now. So, all 5 times the word is joined to the thought of being fearful. Don't be afraid, don't be discouraged. That's what he tells them over and over. And then in Judges, who has just died? Joshua has just died. Was he an incredible leader? Yes, but now he's died, and it says, after the death of Joshua, it came to pass, the children of Israel, they go ask the Lord, who's going to go up and fight for us against the Canaanites now? Who has been winning the battles all along? God has. But now they're in fear because Joshua has passed away. And then we go to chapter 2 of Judges, and it says, an angel of the Lord comes up from Gilgal. And boy, do I wish I had time to tell you all about Gilgal. And the angel goes over at Bochum. What are you doing at Bochum? And he said, listen, they're over there weeping. I made you to go up out of Egypt. I have brought you unto this land that I swore unto your fathers, and I've told you I will never break my covenant with you. Listen to him. You're not to make any league with the inhabitants of the land. You're to throw down their altars, but you haven't obeyed my voice. Why have you done this? Wherefore I said, I will not drive them out from before you. Now they're going to be thorns in your sides, and their gods are going to be a snare to you. And all the people start crying and weeping. And they called the name of the place Bochum. It's a place of weeping. They were supposed to be at Gilgal, but they were over here at Bochum. All Israel failed as we look at this battle now. They failed to remember the scriptures that were given for their admonishment. I will be with you. I will fight your battles. I have given. Do not fear. On and on. They forgot all that. Remember is used 352 times in the Bible. And if you count the variance of it, it increases to 550 times. The root of remember, I'm to keep this in mind and to be mindful of it. He said in Deuteronomy 6:12, beware lest you forget the Lord who brought you forth out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. Over and over, he had to remind them, I'm the one that brought you out. I'm the one that redeemed you. I'm the one that saved you. I'm the one that justified you. He had to remind them over and over. Consequently, they failed to trust the Lord. He gave them his word. He assured them, you will prevail if you will just trust me. Goliath was threatening the freedom of the Israelites. Give me a man. I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man so we can fight together. Saul, he's the captain of the children of Israel. He's the king. Had he failed? Had Israel failed? Everybody within the nation of Israel had failed. And the question before us now, is there anyone who can defeat Goliath? We will find out next week.